Good morning, church.
Good morning.
How are we doing today?
Good.
I'm glad. A few weeks ago, I asked my aunt if I could preach. I don't know why, but I did. I did, and I'm here now. I got the okay, and I'm here now. And there was already a sermon series in place, and this week's prompt, so to speak, was unforgiveness and selfishness. Both of them are very big words, just waiting to be unpacked. But the first thing that came to mind was how exactly they're related. Does everyone struggle with these? Does selfishness come naturally to us? And how does that affect us forgiving other people? And is it then natural to not forgive? It's just so much, you know? So what we're going to do is we're going to try to analyze all of these and answer these questions. I've never preached a day in my life before, so that's what we're going to do. Thank you. So let's begin by exploring selfishness. It literally rules our world. It can be defined as putting our desires, not our needs, before the needs of others. Now, those are two very different things, desires and needs. They should never be confused. Even the most devoted philanthropists can find selfish motives in them. We all do things for selfish reasons. Sometimes it's a good thing, but it's usually a bad thing. There's a reason why we teach our children to share at a very young age. It is, in short, selfish to be selfish is to be bad. I put this in air quotations because the word bad is it's in a gray area. It has varying definitions. We are often inclined to be selfish, leading me to believe that it may be in our nature. Throughout history, countless wars have erupted due to selfish power struggles. Somebody wanted land for themselves, somebody wanted the money, somebody did this and that. Today we struggle with just how selfish we should be as a nation. In our daily lives, we struggle in deciding whether or not to give or take. In Luke chapter 23, under a section in my Bible very ominously titled, The Crucifixion, Jesus approaches his final moments as a man on earth. In verse 34, he intercedes for us. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. This man was about to be murdered by a bunch of people, and he still said, forgive them, because it's their nature. We were about to tear him apart, and he still said, forgive them. This is an age-old conversation. It's been happening. Jesus knew it, and so should we. It is in our very flawed nature to sin and to be selfish, and as people of God, we are only set apart by our effort to actively fight this nature and to serve and to be selfless, to give, to help, to protect, whatever it may be. Now, what does this have to do with unforgiveness? Well, to not forgive is to harbor feelings of anger or even hatred against another party. My mother often tells me that unforgiveness does nothing but poison its host, like a snake burrowing itself in the gaps caused by our anger and eventually bite us. We know then that we should forgive. Perhaps not forget, but definitely forgive. How do we do that, though? How do we look someone in the eye and say, I forgive you? You see, church, no one likes to have gaps in their lives. No one likes to feel stubborn pain that does not wash away. So when unforgiveness settles in, it is not abnormal to normalize it and to adapt to its presence. It gives us a sense of power sometimes. But when we allow unforgiveness to slow us down, we allow it to disrupt our lives, just completely. It disrupts everything. We may not realize it, but it does. Forgiveness has never been a simple task. It is difficult to tame our pride and or pain and forgive someone. It is difficult to forgive ourselves. In Ephesians 4, we're called to get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as Christ and God forgave us. Now, a story. In Matthew 18, Peter asks Jesus how many times his loved ones should sin against him before he can retaliate. He has standards, so he sets a limit. About 7 times, and then he can do something about it. But Jesus laughs in his face and says, no, they're going to sin against you, they're going to hurt you, they're going to cause you pain. But every single time You are special because you make the effort to forgive them. That is exactly what he says. No matter who they are, no matter what they've done, forgive them. Now, just imagine the disciples' face as Christ tells him to chill out and forgive. It is no simple task. Just yesterday, my family and I were binge watching a show called The A-List. In it, a teenage girl terrorizes her peers to a point of near extinction. It's a good show, you should watch it. We come to find out, though, that this girl is only an enemy, really, because she is the product of mistreatment, because these exact peers were terrible to her, and they didn't even remember her when she came back. Now, do we look at her and point a finger and say, well, she should have forgiven them? Because her acts are justified. They were terrible to her. She felt pain. She almost died. So shouldn't she be able to get some revenge? Shouldn't she do something about it? Now, that's where the question lies. For lack of a better word, she was a slave to her unforgiveness. Now, as individuals, we live our lives fighting against any sort of captivity, including mental, emotional, or spiritual. But if we travel the road of unforgiveness, we find nothing but fear, rage, pride, and any other tools leading to a demise. Even the trivial things just grow and grow. We may think they're nothing, but they're there. And they do cause us pain. How do we forgive? That's the question that's still there. That's the million-dollar question. How do we forgive? We've discussed who, why, where, when, everything, but how? I do not have a 12-step. I do not have a manual. I do not have a guide on how to construct a happy house full of forgiving people. Instead, we will examine what it takes to forgive. Honesty, as corny as it sounds, courage, and selflessness. Selflessness. It takes selflessness to forgive. It takes painful, real-life honesty to examine an uncomfortable situation and decide that you will work to go beyond it. To pledge that you will face whatever has changed you, and no matter how difficult it gets, work to forgive. It takes proper courage to face the situation and take the initiative of forgiving. You literally have to be the bigger person. It takes actual selflessness, not selfishness, selflessness, to decide to let go, freeing whatever you've been holding on to. To decide that forgiveness is greater than just yourself. It is selfish but natural to decide the world revolves around us. It is selfless, then, to look beyond our limited circles of life and extend freedom to those we've not forgiven. But wait, this extends to forgiving ourselves as well. It is selfish to keep yourself away from what you can achieve, what you can do, and what you can give. It is selfless, then, to break your own chains. No matter the pain, no matter the depth, our Creator has vouched for us. Our pasts don't anchor us to the bottom of any sea any longer. It is somewhat simple to ask God for forgiveness, but what about doing the forgiving? Friends, this brings me to my final point, the last page. Why is it so hard for us to ask for forgiveness? A couple of Sundays ago, we heard a sermon about submitting. As I'm sure we all know, the word submit often has a negative connotation. We imagine losing a piece of ourselves and never getting it back, or losing dignity. Well, for all intents and purposes, to submit is to have a lack of pride. And we've all heard before that pride cometh before the fall. You've heard the phrase, pride robs you of relationships, it adds weight to your already heavy shoulders, and long story short, pride gets you shot. Pride gets you hurt. Don't be prideful, guys. Pride will not let you ask for forgiveness. No matter if you need it or desperately want it, pride will selfishly hold you in a false position of power until you crash. To ask for forgiveness, you still need the honesty and selflessness from before. Except this time, it's different. This time, you need to be frank with yourself. Friends, we need to be able to set aside any agendas we may have and find humility. The selflessness we need is to offer sincerity, offer our own comfort in exchange for truth. This, I believe, is what makes us Christian. It is not in the pews or in the hymns. It is not in the 2-minute turnaround, although that's very nice. What sets us apart is our decision to step away from our selfish, unforgiving nature and to be selfless, offering whatever we've got to live in truth, and freedom, to give what we have, and to empower others by doing so.